Hey folks, this is Kalani. We have some huge class changes, buffs and nerfs to go over this week, and with the patch launch day so close, these could be the last balance tuning adjustments we see until 11.2 goes live. There are also some very large buffs for the new Reshii Wraps artifact Cloak coming in 11.2 that will make it a huge power boost when you start to upgrade it. There are a few new quality of life updates coming with the patch I want to highlight, and we have yet another patch waiting in the wings ready to start its testing cycle. There's a lot to talk about, so let's break it all down in this week's WoW news video. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. First up this week, we have a long list of class buffs and nerfs to go over. With the patch launching in about a week, these may be some of the last adjustments we see, so they're going to be very important. Starting with the Death Knights and the Rider of the Apocalypse hero talent tree, undeath damage will see a 20% nerf. I guess all of those buffs and added bonuses were getting a little too powerful. Reaper's Mark will no longer automatically explode below 5% health, and it will instead travel to the nearest enemy when an affected target dies. Unholy Forset bonus saw a slight nerf, Frost's Forset was nerfed as well, and Frostbane's Icy Fury damage was cut down by 30%. For Sandlane, the 2-set will extend diseases a little bit longer, but the 4-set was reduced to a 35% damage bonus, down from 50%. For Blood specifically, they're going to see an 8% buff across the board. We're actually going to see this for quite a few tanks in this week's notes. I guess tank damage hasn't kept up so far in the 11.2 testing cycle. For Frost specifically, they'll see a 3% damage nerf, but Frostbane's damage has been increased by 15%, and Howling Blade's damage now scales with Mastery. And then there are a couple of bug fixes thrown in for good measure. Demon Hunters have a couple of changes this week. Vengeance will see an 8% damage boost for all of their damage, so that's not too shabby, but their mastery effectiveness is getting cut down by 17%, so that's not going to be ideal. For the Druids, Feral will see an 8% damage buff across the board, so that'll be nice going into next week, and Guardian will see a 12% damage buff for all of their damage, and you know when we get into these double-digit blanket buffs, things must have been a bit dire for those specializations up until this point. Balance is going to get an 8% buff for all of their damage as well, so both Druid DPS specs will see some big buffs heading into 11.2. Moving on to the Evokers, the Chrono Warden 4-set now also increases the damage and healing of Essence abilities by 30%, and Scale Commander's bombardment damage is now properly increased by various damage buffs. Augmentation will see a 5% damage buff across the board. They're still trying to get Augmentation to a spot where its own damage is good enough to offset the various nerfs to their support kit. Maybe this last 5% will do the trick. And then for Devastation, they'll see a 3% buff for all damage, and a further 20% buff to Pyre and Firestorm damage. The Hunters made the list this week. For Dark Ranger Beast Mastery, the Bell Tolls had its damage bonus increased to 6%, and Phantom Pain's damage bonus was increased to 30%. For Marksmanship, Black Arrow had its damage nerfed by 8%. Moving on to Pack Leader, Better Together was nerfed down to 3% bonuses for the attack speed buff and the pet damage buff, and the 4-set Stampede damage was nerfed yet again, this time by another 20%. And then for Sentinel, both the 2-set and 4-set bonuses were nerfed slightly. So it's not a great week for the Hunters so far. For Beast Mastery specifically, Killer Instinct was buffed up to an 8 and 16% damage boost for Kill Command, but they will see another 5% blanket damage nerf, so I guess Beast Mastery was still doing too much damage before this week. The mages are up next. For Frostfire, Fire will see a 50% damage buff for Frostfire Burst. Excess Frost now casts at 200% effectiveness, and the 2-set bonus was buffed up in every way. For Frost, their 2-set bonus saw a slight nerf, and then for Fire specifically, Ignite's damage is being nerfed by 10%, Controlled Destruction is being nerfed down to 0.3% per stack, down from 0.5% per stack, but Meteor damage is being increased by 20%. Apparently, Fire Mage was doing a little too well, and instead of nerfing everything, the dev team decided to just cut down Ignite a bit and see how things go. Monks squeezed in at the last minute in an extra round of class updates. The Windwalker 4-set bonus got a slight buff. Flurry Strikes will trigger after you spend 120 energy, down from 150, so you're going to get those procs more often. And then Windwalker will also get a 5% damage increase for all of their abilities and damage as well. Paladins don't have too much to write home about this week, just a bug fix for Herald of the Sun, and then for Holy, Pillars of Light Beacon of Virtue healing was increased by 25%. Priests have a couple of changes for Shadow this week. Mind Blast damage has been increased by 30%, Mind Flay Insanity damage will see a 20% buff, Halo damage is getting buffed by 30%, Psychic Link is getting adjusted yet again, back up to 40% of direct damage, so your cleave and splash damage will be in a better place as we head into patch 11.2. Insidious IO was cut in half though, down to a 10 and 20% damage bonus. Shamans have quite a few buffs to look forward to this week. Farseer Elemental will see a 40% buff to Ancestor Chain Lightning, and there are a lot of bug fixes for Totemic Enhancement. For Elemental specifically, Elemental Blast will see a 20% buff, Lightning Bolt and Lava Burst are both being increased by 35%, Frost Shock is getting a 50% buff, Earth and Rage damage has been increased by 35%, Earth Shock damage is up 25%, and Ice Fury will see a 35% buff as well. And then we got some quick bug fixes for enhancement too. Warlocks have a bit of a mixed bag. For Diabolist Demonology, the 2-set bonus has been nerfed by 45%, so that's gonna hurt, and then Wicked Cleave, Chaos Salvo, and Fellseeker also a 20% nerf, so I guess all of those Warlock buffs had to run out at some point, unless you are playing Affliction of course, because they're going to see a 35% buff to Unstable Affliction and Summon Dark Glare damage. Focused Malignancy is also being doubled up to an 80% bonus, up from 40%, so good news for Affliction this week. And then last but not least, we come to the Warriors. Arms will see a 5% buff across the board for all of their abilities, and Fury is going to get the same 5% buff as well. So nothing too crazy or exciting, but a 5% buff is definitely better than seeing some nerfs. That's all for the class changes, buffs and nerfs this week, and as we said earlier, with the patch being so close now, these could be the last balance tuning changes we see until the season starts, unless a class is either crazy strong or super weak in that first week of the patch. There is always a chance the dev team tries to squeeze in some last minute changes before reset day. It wouldn't be the first time that's happened, so if your class or spec still feels kinda bad, there is still time to get some cheeky buffs in before the patch goes live, though I wouldn't expect to see any actual changes, just more number tuning. That's not all of the changes that were included in this week's PTR build. The special effects tied to the new artifact Cloak have also seen some massive buffs this week. Each role will have their own effect, and they're pretty basic for the most part, so they're easy to use and understand. The DPS one just deals some damage split between enemies, the healing one has a chance to proc some extra heals, and then the tank one provides you with a shield that reduces your damage taken. I guess each of these abilities just wasn't powerful enough on the PTR, because this week the DPS effect was buffed by 152%, so that's going to deal about 1 million damage per proc now, which should add up to a lot of damage done overall in your dungeons, delves or raid encounters. The healing effect was also buffed by 152%, making that much stronger overall, and then the tank effect was buffed up by 200%, so your Reshii Wraps Cloak will provide significantly more power for your character as we head into patch 11.2. We also have some interesting quality of life additions coming in patch 11.2, and the most recent one is tied to your seasonal spark acquisition and keeping track of how many you've looted and whether or not you are behind the current seasonal cap. In season 3 we will be collecting sparks of starlight, and they're going to come from the usual sources, mainly weekly quests and activities, so nothing has really changed on that front, but when you acquire a spark in patch 11.2 you will also get some starlight spark dust. This new currency doesn't really do anything and you can't spend it anywhere from what I can tell, so the only real purpose it serves is to show you how many fractured sparks you have collected, and if you hover over it you can see what the current seasonal cap is. So if your number is lower than the current cap and you have already collected a spark from a weekly quest in the current week, you're going to be behind in fractured spark acquisition, so you should be able to loot those extra fractured sparks in other content like delves, dungeons and from raid boss kills. This is just a much simpler way of keeping track of that particular system without needing to use a console command or an add-on, so that's nice to see. And then the last bit of news we have for this week is that another patch has been detected on the dev team's internal servers. A couple of weeks ago, patch 11.2.5 popped up, which shouldn't come as any surprise. That patch will probably hit the PTR and start its testing cycle shortly after patch 11.2 goes live. There really hasn't been that much time between a patch hitting live servers and the next patch going up on the PTR since the start of Dragonflight. The dev team have been keeping this content train chugging along at a very quick pace. What is kind of surprising is that patch 11.2.7 was just detected on internal servers as well, so they're already an extra step ahead right now, and if they're testing patch 11.2.5 and 11.2.7 internally, it kind of makes me wonder just how quickly we could see the 0.5 patch go live. They might be looking to speed things up a bit as we head into the next expansion. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but if we take a quick peek at the roadmap from earlier this year, we can see that the 0.7 patch should include story and quests, which no doubt will be setting the stage for Midnight in the expansion launch, and then we should also expect some new content and system updates, which doesn't really tell us all that much. But what is interesting is that the WoW housing icon is placed right after patch 11.2.7, so we could see the foundation for housing in the 0.7 patch, and we should be able to actually play with player housing very soon after that patch goes live. You've also probably noticed that the timeline has already turned green by the time we hit patch 11.2.7 as well, and we all know that means Legion Remix, so that could either be a part of the 0.7 patch as well, or just run alongside it as a separate event. Either which way, we have some huge events and features coming our way very soon. But that's all of the updates we have so far, so that's it for this week's WoW news video. What do you think of this week's round of class buffs and nerfs? Are there any classes or specs that you feel still need a lot of attention as we head into patch 11.2? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can find links to the description or click the join button just below the video. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful in any way, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're always kept up to date. Thanks for watching, folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.